Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
What's going on? What's going on? You are tuned into the Cigars with Mac podcast. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. Today is going to be a great show. I have an interview with a young lady who is a founder of a nonprofit, and man, it's very amazing. But before we get started, as you always know, please don't forget to download, like, follow, and share the podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. Also, please don't forget to follow us on YouTube. That's the Cigars and Mac podcast on YouTube. Also, If you have any show topics you'd like for me to discuss, or you'd like to discuss business, hit me up at info@cigarswithmacpod.com. Again, info@cigarswithmacpod.com. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast financially, hit us up on Cash App at $cigarswithmac, $cigarswithmac. Now, as we all know on the Cigars with Mac podcast, we don't have just one topic we talk about. The only commonality we have that I always do on the podcast is smoke cigars. But I love to talk about an array of topics. And this young lady reached out to me through LinkedIn. And I just got on LinkedIn concerning my podcast. I actually have a professional LinkedIn account, but I wanted to separate the two, and I didn't realize how many podcasters were on LinkedIn, and man, I've been really networking. So with no further ado, I'd like everybody to meet Renee, and we're going to discuss her nonprofit, and we're going to just talk about it, and we're going to have a good time. Renee, how you doing today, young lady?
I'm good. How are you?
All is well.
Well, that's a good start.
Yes, ma'am. Now, Renee, please give us the name of your nonprofit again, where you guys are located, and and let's start from there.
Okay, well, I founded COPE 24. That's COPE 24. It stands for Changing Our Parenting Experience, and 24 and 24 hours a day.
Okay.
And we are in St. Louis, Missouri. And we are a national organization that's promoting the need to make parenting education a national priority. Okay.
Now, tell the people what made you start this nonprofit. I know you told me behind the scenes, but I want the people to know.
Okay. Well, it goes back over 20 years ago now. Back then, I was the mother of 3 girls. My husband was a very successful banker. I was a stay-at-home mom. Life was good.
Yeah.
And my daughters were between the ages of 7 and 14, so I was sort of seeing the light at the end of that, tunnel where I got to get these kids in school all day, and I can do some of the things that I want to do during the day. I wanted to go back to school, and I was then a competitive tennis player.
Okay.
And on Christmas Eve night one year, we had 2 children show up on our doorstep. The parents had made some really bad choices in their life, and they had lost their jobs. And these are 2 professional parents. The father in this story is my brother-in-law, and they were from Alabama, and they were pretty much destitute.
Okay.
And so we had to evaluate this situation and determine what it was we were going to do. And actually, I said 2 kids, but the oldest child was 2, and the second one was due to be born in February, so still 6 weeks away from his birth.
Yeah.
And we spent that Christmas week just a lot of time with this couple, and my husband told his brother that if you want to come back here, I will get you a good job. We will help you find a place to live, and you can get a restart. Mm-hmm. And so they did. They came back to St. Louis, and the week before the baby was born, they stayed in our house, but quickly we got them moved into a rental home. We put all the appliances in the home. His brother started a new job immediately. We supplemented their income because he had been married for 25 years, and he had 3 boys from another marriage that now he's going to have to support these 2 families. And as I said, these 2 adults made some really, really bad decisions, and now you have 2 little children that are going to be dependent upon these decisions. And so we had decided that the best course of action was to lift up these parents, to see if we could get them in a position where they could be healthy again and they could raise their children themselves. And so we spent 3 years doing that. I mean, jobs, money.
Yeah.
We watched their children often. And
yeah.
What I was seeing were things I knew I should not be seeing.
Yeah.
And at the end of 3 years, my husband and I had decided that all we have done is enable more bad decisions.
Okay.
And at that point, the job was going to go away. The employer had called my husband and said, "We're going to fire your brother." The landlord had called us and said, "We're going to evict this family unless you continue making the rent." And we said, "We're not." And so my husband went over to his brother and his sister-in-law, because this man had divorced his first wife and he had married this woman. And we told him, "We're done. Now, we don't want anything bad to happen to these kids. So what we recommend is that you two go off into the wild blue yonder and figure out your life, and leave your children with us. And if you never get it together, you will know that at least you provided for your children.
Mm-hmm.
We will give your kids, we give ours. And if you do get it together, you know right where to come and get your kids."
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was not so politely kicked to the curb. And so the next day was when I made that hotline call to child welfare and said, "Look, this is what I've seen, and I need you to investigate this. And I'm not saying investigate it, and if you see what's the problem, I'm saying if you will investigate it and you see what I see, we'll be a resource. We're willing to foster. We're even willing to adopt. But you guys have to walk us through it, and you have to make it legal, because we really don't know anything about the child welfare system." And that phone call ignited a 4-year fight for these kids.
Wow.
And in that 4 years, there will be 3 rounds where the children will come and live with us for extended periods of time, and we will always have to give them back to a mom that I know is no better than she was when I made the first call. And the last time we went to court, we knew we were going to lose, because the system is about reunification. We understood that at that point. We went back to Alabama. When I made that hotline call, these kids were 3 and 5 years old. When we went back to Alabama the last time, the children were 7 and 9 years old. And we haven't seen them since.
Oh, no.
And they will soon be 21 and 23. So life has not been good for them. I am able to follow one of them on Facebook, kind of lurking, because she doesn't know that, Cook 24 exists. But what happened was I got advice from someone when I made that hotline call that you should start journaling. And I took that advice because I have a bad memory. Mm-hmm. And I would sit at my computer every morning and I would journal anything that had happened the day before, any conversation with lawyers, with caseworkers, with the children, with the parents. And some mornings it was just a couple of sentences, but other mornings it was a couple of hours.
Wow.
And the second time we had to give these kids back to a mom that I knew was no better. I was so, at that point, kind of appalled at the system that's set up to protect children, that I sat down with all the notes that I had journaled and I began writing. I had no training as a writer, but what I was doing was writing a manuscript. I didn't even know it. It became a manuscript, and the manuscript ultimately got picked up by a publishing house and became a published book. Now, I saw that going in a whole different direction. I mean, you can imagine, you've been picked up by a publisher and, you've never had a dream of this. It's just kind of happening. And, I thought a lot of different things would happen, but it opened doors that I didn't know exist. Yeah. I got a call about 6 months after the book was released. The book's titled Whose Best Interest? And I got a call from the Director of Social Services for the state of Missouri about 6 months later, asking me to come into Jefferson City, which is our capital city. She wanted to meet me. And I did, and I was so excited, and the meeting went really well. And she appointed me to Missouri's Task Force on Children's Justice. And I started serving on that committee in March of 2008. And I actually termed out of that committee in March of last year, which was great because that's when COVID hit, and they haven't been able to meet anyway. Subsequent to that, that committee formed a critical event review committee, and I started serving on that, and it actually became the recorder, writing the reports The reports go to the federal government. And all of this was educating me on the why. Because when we fought for these kids, we didn't understand why. Why are the policies like this? And when I went to the first task force meeting, the task force are people that are educated and trained and work in different positions across the state. They're judges and lawyers and case managers, social workers, CASA, CAC, detectives, nurses, doctors, all of these people that have a hand in the child welfare system. And they were no closer to a solution than I was. And so I woke up one morning and the thought was, go into our high schools and start speaking. And I didn't know, I was not a trained speaker either. But we had allowed our daughters to pick their high schools, and they all three picked different high schools. So I had three to choose from, because by this time, two of my kids are out of high school. They're in college. They're away, actually. So I called the three high schools, and I told them that I'd written this book, and I had this story that I wanted to share, and I was invited immediately into two of those high schools. The first high school I went to, I was a nervous wreck, because I hadn't done a speech since I'd been in high school, and by this time, I'm in my 40s. And I go into this classroom, and I'm gaining momentum. This is good. I'm okay with this. And out of the corner of my eye, I can see the teacher over at her desk, and she's on her computer, just typing away. And I thought, wow, that's really rude. But I plugged away. I just blocked it out of my mind and kept going. And after the class, the teacher came up to me and said, I just want you to know, I was sending an email to my cousin, who's a teacher in a neighboring school district. She teaches psychology, and I wanted her to know what you're doing. Well, by the time I got home, I had an email from that teacher inviting me to come to her school and speak. We set it up for the next week, and by the time I got there the next week, she had invited a teacher that's called the Family and Consumer Science teacher. They teach classes like parenting, child development, family relations, adult living. Sometimes with a health teacher. But she had invited that teacher from their school and all of the students from those classes. So I had a large group, and I did my presentation. And by the time I got home at the end of that day, that Family and Consumer Science teacher, which we'll call FACS teachers, that's their acronym, had posted on Missouri listserv for teachers what I was doing, and I had emails from across the state to come and speak. And that just took off literally overnight. I mean, for the next 6 years, I will leave my house on Sunday night and not come home until Friday, just going from school to school to school, speaking and just sharing my story. There was no Code 24.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is prior to the nonprofit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So about 18 months into this, I'm thinking, you know what? Because now I'm getting requests from all of our neighboring states, Illinois and Kentucky and just all of our border states. There's like 7 that border Missouri. And so I can go to some of them. But then I start getting emails and requests from Georgia and Florida and New York and California. And it's like, okay, I've got to come up with another plan. And so I remember I was out of town. I was in a hotel, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew what we needed to be doing. Because, see, when I was in the classrooms, in between classes, I was kind of cheating. Teachers always have to step out in the hall and monitor what's going on. And so I could look at their textbooks, and I could look at what other supplemental material that they were using, and I could see that what was missing was anything that was reality-based. There's certain, I know you told me yesterday that you're a parent.
Yes, ma'am.
You've got a young child. And there are certain things that all parents go through, and none of us, I don't care how wealthy you are, how poor you are, whether you live in the city or the country. It doesn't matter what the demographics is. No parent wants to listen to a baby cry or a toddler throw a tantrum. Or bedtime was my personal parenting favorite. They never want to go to bed. And then you move into later years, and it's the lying, and it's homework, and teenagers, it's the inappropriate dress, and all of these things that we butt heads with our kids over, but they're normal, predictable behaviors. And what I was envisioning that night in that hotel room was we could create like these 5-minute videos of common parenting situations that are always stressful and frustrating. And in these role plays, we could have each situation escalate to abuse, neglect, or at least dysfunction, and then stop the video and ask the class, now what went wrong? You know, what other choices did these parents have, and what will you do? Because there is no one right way to parent, just as there's no one wrong way to parent.
That's correct.
And I got home and I shared with my husband, and he's like, hey, before you start producing products, you've got to have a nonprofit. And so that's when Cope 24 was born, was, okay, we're going to produce reality-based parenting material targeting our high school students, but that's like the primary target. Some of our stuff can be used in middle school. All of our stuff can be used for young adults already in parenting or thinking about becoming parents. So there's a lot of uses for the material.
That's correct.
Yeah, so in 2012, we released the Cope 24 Parenting Skill Program, and that was like 10 short 5-minute videos in these parenting situations. We actually hired, talent, adults and children, to role play these parenting situations. And then after that, it was like, okay, we need follow-up to this. And so we started producing these full-length documentary videos, and we just picked one topic, but really delve into it, because now we're thinking this should be totally high school on these videos, and kids are more mature, and we can get deeper, and they're closer. You know, they're closer to being sexually active. They're closer to having these serious relationships. They're even closer to getting married, you know? So we have done 4 full-length documentary videos that are used now they're already in use in over 600 school districts. So we're making some headway.
Now, when did the nonprofit start? What year did you start that?
We got our status from the federal government in 2009, and we released the first project in 2011, the Cope 24 Parenting Skill Program. And now we've produced these 4 full-length documentary videos. So it takes about 2.5 years. I don't start a project until I have at least half of the money raised. And then when you start a project, it's about a year of, getting people that participate. They're willing to give testimony. They're willing to do interviews. And you have to have a lot of people, and you have to have people from different areas of the country and in different situations. And so it's about a year of prep, and then it's about a year of actually filming and editing till you get that final product out. And so that fast forwards us to 2021.
Okay. Oh man. So do you actually have a physical building for the nonprofit?
Well, I'm fortunate that I can work out of my home, and I subcontract with everybody. So with production companies, event planners, even my people that do my books for me, my website for me. You can't do everything.
That's right.
And I really got asked to speak a lot before COVID, and I developed that skill set, and I have this mind that these ideas pop into. But you can't learn. I can't become a cameraman and a videographer and be able to write the scripts for the narrative. And you can't learn how to do all of that stuff, and
That's
that
correct.
takes me away from the child advocacy aspect of what I'm doing. So, we're in an age now where we can work from our home. But it's funny. It's a good thing my kids are gone, and we have a big house, because it's like a warehouse. Every time you produce another video, you got to order 1,000 copies of it. So
Yes, ma'am.
do you mind if I share with your listeners the topic of our videos?
You go right ahead. You have the floor. I'm enjoying listening to you. You sure you didn't go to school for public speaking? Because yesterday we were talking, I can tell you kind of like me. I'm the kind of guy I can actually speak. I can speak publicly on the fly, but I'm good at it because I did it a lot as a kid, and I present a lot. So that's why I told you it's going to be very informal, and I could tell by your energy that it would run smoothly. So you have the floor, and I'm enjoying listening to you speak because the like you said before, parenting, it goes beyond classism, race, all of that stuff. And I think you guys are hitting at the, like you said, from what I'm understanding, the main target is the high schools, even though you guys go to universities and things like that. But if you can catch them at that age and prepare them then, I think they'll be ready. I think they'll be more proactive, and they'll be ahead of the game when they do start having children.
Well, that's right. They'll have a more realistic idea of what to expect. Because let's face it, there are things that even adults, when you plan and you can afford your children, and when you're, carrying that baby, you're expecting that first baby. You know what the fantasy is. My baby's going to be the cutest. My baby's going to, have hair, be bald, or my baby's going to be the best athlete, or the best musician, or the best artist, or that's the fantasy.
Yeah.
And some of that will be reality later on. But the reality is, when you bring that baby home, it's none of those things.
It's none of those.
The only
things.
thing it's capable of doing is eating and sleeping and crying. And to expect anything different is our fantasy. And even when we are educated, if we're not educated in child care, in child rearing, you're shocked. I mean, there's a huge change when you bring home that first baby to your life. Fun as you know it, the definition changes because babies sleep in jags. They don't sleep for 8 and 10 hours straight. They sleep in 2.5 to 4 hour jabs, and that's not how we sleep. So we've got this huge adjustment where we feel sleep deprived for several months, and then the only way the baby can communicate with you is through crying.
That's right.
And until you figure out what that cry means, it's probably because it's hungry, or it should need to be changed, or maybe it's both, or, figuring that out when you are new, and if you don't have a support system. I mean, that's part of our programming, getting kids to understand, don't think you can do this on your own. You're going to need a support system, and it doesn't matter if you're 15 or you're 25.
That's
you
right.
need a support system. And so that's what we're trying to do. There's a form of child abuse that happens 99.9% of the time because the baby won't stop crying.
Yes.
It's the only reason it happens, and it's shaken baby syndrome. A parent or an adult, it's not always a parent, gets so upset. They've done everything. They've changed and rocked and burped and fed and sang, and this baby's still crying and crying. And if it's a day that you have a headache, or you've got the stomach flu, or your boss was a big jerk at work,
yes,
that's all of the fuel that you need to just pick this baby up and shake it. Not intending to hurt it, intending to kill it, but babies can't hold their own head up.
That's right.
And when you do that, and it just takes a matter of seconds, when you're angry, think about how strong you are, and that baby's brain is bouncing around on the inside of the skull. And so our first video was on that topic because our medical technology and capabilities has gotten so good that most of these babies will now live, but most of them will never be healthy again. And so you took what is not a fun situation, that first 6 months for many babies and parents is not that much fun, but now you've made it even worse because now, as frustrating as it was, now you're going to be raising a severely handicapped child. And our kids need to know that.
And let me say this. When you told me about that yesterday, I was like, who in the hell would shake a baby?
Oh my gosh. The video that we did on it, I mean, we got people from one of the people that we interviewed, the father that shook the baby, was a youth minister.
Oh,
See,
God.
people think that this is like somebody high on drugs, somebody that's always been a criminal. No, any of us can snap, and it's just that second. And so I actually, on our website, we produced this for free because I said, teachers can use this as a resource. We call it The Game. It's on our website, and I'm speaking in the classroom, and I have already shared with these kids everything that they need to know about crying and shaking, okay? And I said, okay, now we're going to play a game. And I play this game out. I won't share with you what it is, but you'd be shocked. And it doesn't matter if I do this in front of freshmen who've had very little training or seniors who are 4 more years mature, even at the end of the semester. And they all get it wrong.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand the worst thing that you can do is pick this baby up and shake it. Almost any other decision you can make will be better. Even stepping outside so that you can't hear the baby crying and you can get yourself under control. And they're shocked. If you ask them, step outside or shake this baby, they'll all be, oh, you can't step outside. That's child neglect. It's child abuse. Okay, step outside or shake the baby. And you can literally see the light bulb go on. And it's like, how easy would that be to teach all of our teenagers that? Then we did it. That video is called the life sentence. Because that's what it is. If you do that, it's a life sentence for the child and it's a life sentence for the parent. If you go to prison, sometimes parents do get a life sentence, especially if the child dies. But even if they, one of the people in it was in prison for 17 years. One was in for 99 years. It's just horrific. But what about the parent that's left taking care of this child? And what about the child, the rest of the child's life? Because this was an otherwise normal, healthy infant. And now life is completely different for everybody. And that's what I want all kids to know. Then we did one on teen parenting and support system. And so what we challenge students to understand is we already know what you're doing. We know what you're doing. So what is your plan if there's conception? And we know you think you got this covered, but almost everybody we interviewed was on birth control. And they still got pregnant. And so what is your plan? If you are sexually active, what is your plan if a baby is conceived? And we ask the males as well as the females because their needs. And have you even talked to your parents? Like, would they just kick you out of the house? And what if your parents did kick you out of the house? What would you do? How would you...
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Survive. How would you survive with a baby? We want kids thinking about these things while they're taking these classes, and they've got a teacher that's trained in child development and parenting that they can ask those questions to, So then we did one on drugs and alcohol and parenting. We called it Parenting Under the Influence because, and I could tell you, Courtney, these topics aren't random. When I was doing case review for the state of Missouri, we call them critical events. That is because these were cases where the worst had happened. A child has died or has been so severely injured they'll probably never be 100% healthy again. And many of these cases were open cases, which means child welfare was already involved, there were judges involved, caseworkers involved, and yet a child has been harmed. And the federal government wants to know why would that happen. They're looking for gaps in the system, systemic problems, so they're asking us to do these reviews. And when we do the reviews, yes, we are looking for what the system did wrong. But we all have to begin asking ourselves, what is it we as parents are doing wrong? Because we wouldn't need the system if we didn't have parents doing these things to their children.
If there was no flaws in our parenting style, that's correct.
That's right. And so what I saw was a short, sort of long list of common denominators. And on that was immaturity.
That's right.
Which is what leads to shaken baby. We saw drugs and alcohol. You see mental health. You see failure to protect. You see domestic violence. So it's kind of this short, long list. And so I want to do each one of those topics separately, because students need to stay on one topic at a time. You know, you're dealing with their maturity level as well. So if you mix too many things in at one time, it's confusing. So that's why we did Shaken Baby, and then we did teen parenting, and then we did drugs and alcohol. In this last video, we did make it a little bit more complicated, but we're going to break it down in the future. There's a movement that's beginning in this nation. It's the ACEs movement, ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Mm-hmm. And what is so interesting is that there were two doctors in San Diego in the mid-1990s that stumbled across this issue. They were working with a group of people that all of the people in their study group, their program that they put together, were suffering with obesity. Mm-hmm. And they, as doctors, were trying to figure out the root cause of obesity. And I don't know what all was involved for the members of the program, you know, how much therapy, how often therapy, was there dietary, exercise. I don't know all the details, but they all were in some therapeutics with these doctors. And one day, one of the doctors asked a patient, how old were you the first time you had sexual intercourse? And without a hesitation, the patient said 4 years old. And the doctor just flinched.
What?
Like, at 4 years old, yeah, at 4 years old, you don't know what sex is. We're not sexual. And so later, he starts with talking and sharing this with his colleague, and they decided they were going to ask everybody in this program the same question. And it turned out 70% of the people in this program had been sexually abused as children. Now, I don't want you looking at everybody that's obese and saying, yeah, oh, okay, now we know why. It wasn't 100%, it was 70%. But that was a big deal. And so it got them to thinking, well, what other adversities do children face in childhood that may lead to really bad outcomes, health outcomes for the future? So they created what they called the ACEs studies, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And again, they went back to kind of what I did in critical event review, and they asked 10 questions on this survey. And they were yes or no answers. These things either did or did not happen to you. There was no essay. There was no, either this did or did not happen to you throughout your childhood before the age of 18. And there were, out of the 10 questions, 3 of them had to do with abuse, sexual, physical, emotional. Another 2 fell under neglect, physical and emotional. And then 5 were under the category of family dysfunction. So were both of your parents, did they suffer with mental health or addictions, or did they get divorced, or was there domestic violence, or was one or both of your parents incarcerated? Those were the 10 questions.
Wow. And
they surveyed over 17,000 people, middle-class people with jobs, with, I think 70% of the people in the study had at least a high school level education. So I don't want you to think they went into the most impoverished areas, you know, to get these statistics up. They did not. And it turned out 64% of us grow up in a home with 1 to 3 ACEs. 64%. And 12.5% of us grow up in homes with 4 or more of these ACEs. And any combination of 4 or more, they saw this huge outcome that was awful. So when they looked at, to be in the study, you agreed to take the survey and you agreed to open up your medical history, both physical and mental health. And what they found was exponentially higher rates of heart disease, lung disease, liver disease, suicidality, and even life expectancy was reduced by as much as 20 years if you were raised like that. So, I mean, you can't just ignore that. And
No,
so
you
there's
can't.
a whole ACEs community out there that is saying, wait, this information needs to get out to everybody. And so that's really a big movement now in the nation.
And let me say this. I know my wife and I got married my last year in the military, but we didn't have kids till 3 years later. We literally like, hey, we want to wait a little bit before we have kids. And I'll be honest with you, my boys were pretty easy to rear. And one of the reasons why is because we had a great support system. And my wife and I, we're pretty level-headed, you know. And I'm a disabled vet, so you know this shows you that. But at the same token, and don't get me wrong, there are things that we had to learn as parents. Like for instance, with if I have two boys. I have a 10-year-old and I have a 7-year-old, and we had no idea that my 7-year-old had a learning disability. So first we thought he was autistic, and he doesn't have autism. Yeah. But what his disability is that he has to learn. He learns better in more on a one-on-one setting. And right. Would you believe that that's how I learn best? And I'm a high school dropout, Renee. I have a GED. Now I have my bachelor's degree and I'm working on my master's degree. But the way I learn is I always tell my son, I say, when you learn something, learn the correct way that you're taught, and then make that learning easy for you. Dice it up. Dice that learning up so you can learn it best for you. And you know, I think about as growing up as a child, and my parents did the best my mother's a school teacher, but at the same token, she would have never thought about getting me evaluated and anything like that. You know, it just wasn't something that was an issue. But my wife works in childcare. My mom, she's a school teacher. She was in childcare, and so we are more aware of things like that now. And then,
well, the whole nation is more aware of it, and we're just trying to broaden that awareness.
That's correct.
Because, when you have a child that's got a learning disability, but you don't know they have a learning disability when they're 18 months old, when they're 3 years old. It's not until maybe closer to them entering preschool or kindergarten, and then sometimes when you don't know something like that, you get frustrated. Child.
It's very easy to get frustrated. It is.
And then you feel bad later when you realize, oh my gosh, they were trying, and I didn't do this well. And, when the teachers that I work with and the work that I do, what we try to get kids to understand is we're never good in the beginning. I was a competitive tennis player. I wasn't a good tennis player when I started, when I decided I wanted to learn how to play tennis. I was just a good athlete.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's the reason I picked tennis. And then you fast forward 15 years down the road, and, I'm one of the top tennis players in St. Louis by that time. Well, but I wasn't there before that. And parenting's the same way. You're going to get better. No matter what you get your college degree in and you go out into the workforce. Yes, you're educated, but you're just going to be okay at what you do. But 5 years in, you're going to be much better. And 10 years in, you're going to be much better than that. We just get better. So expect to make mistakes. But what we're trying to get parents to understand is we have to recognize that this was wrong. And I tell kids all the time that as parents, what you need to do is evaluate. I mean, when I competed in tennis, no matter whether I won or lost, I was laying in bed at night thinking, now why did I win? Or why did I lose? What could I do better? What did I do really good? What did my opponent do? Like, I need to learn how to do that, you have to be able to evaluate. And as parents, okay, how's my marriage going? How am I feeling? How are my kids feeling? Am I happy? Are my kids happy? Because if the answers are negative, the child can't change. The parents got to change.
That's right.
You know, and getting our youth to even be thinking about that. You know, we are promoting the need to make parenting education not just a national priority. What we mean by that is we believe that every high school student should be taking either parenting or child development classes while they're in high school in the entire nation. I don't care where you go to school. I don't care how rich your neighborhood is. We have dysfunction in our families everywhere.
Yes, ma'am.
People like to think this is disconnected to poverty, or it is not. It is not. People that have means are able to hide it better. But I want you to think about this. I described ACEs to you. I described those 10 ACEs. And I know it's kind of hard to remember it. I just said it. But what the point I want to make is that at least 4 or 5 of them are not even illegal. So it's not illegal for you to argue with your spouse, maybe name call, cuss at each other in front of your children. But it's dysfunctional. It's not illegal for you to call your children names and yell and scream at them and belittle them. But it's dysfunctional. It's not illegal for you to get divorced. But it's going to be dysfunctional in the eyes of the child. It's not illegal if you're 21 to drink and get drunk and have children. But it's dysfunctional. And it's also not illegal to have a mental health problem. But if you don't keep it in check, it's dysfunctional. And so when people wonder why child welfare didn't do this or didn't do that, they see what you and I see when they go and investigate. But a lot of dysfunction is not illegal. And so how do we change that? And I believe education is the way that we're going to do that. We've got to take this serious, because when you have 64% of your population growing up in homes that are at some level of dysfunction, I mean, where's the tipping point? And those ACEs studies have continued since the mid-1990s, and it's getting worse. I mean, we have areas of the country where that 4 ACEs or more population is at over 20%. And so when you look at even things that we see socially now, the anger that our nation has, there's nothing wrong with the emotion of anger. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. But to think that we can do the things that we're doing when we're angry, that's anger. That's not having critical thinking skills. It's not having anger management skills. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of things that they teach when they teach parenting and child development. Because you have to be able to keep those things in control when you're raising children.
That's right.
If you think about the perfect situation, the parents have good jobs and they make good money, so they're providing really well. And the children are living in a safe environment, so they're protecting their children very well. And they love their kids. And they are nurturing their children. They're reading books to them, and they're doing family activities, and they're doing all of the things that would be listed. But if those parents have a lot of anger, maybe from things that happened in their childhood, maybe it was at the hands of their parents, maybe their parents don't even know about it. Maybe it was somebody else and they've been afraid to share it. But there's anger. There's just this slow burn always happening. And you're raising these children. If you're angry, you're going to raise angry children, and yet nothing bad ever happens to that child.
That's right.
So getting to understand that's what that's what Code 24 is trying to do.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know where you want to go with this, but I know you can't stay on forever. I just want the people that are listening to this to think about this. We have had mandates in our high schools for graduation since before I graduated. I graduated in 1977, so you can figure out the math to figure out how old I am now. I can remember in the 1960s, early 70s, where we had this award that you could earn. It was a presidential certification of something, and it had to do with your gym class. Like, if you could run a mile in under whatever amount of minutes, if you could throw a shot put so far, if you could do so high in the high jump, you literally earned a patch that supposedly came from the president. And that was an effort that our nation was putting forth because we needed to be more fit. We needed to be healthier as a nation. And so along with that, we mandated a requirement that every student has to have a credit in gym to graduate from high school. And I'm saying, okay, so where is the evidence that we have become healthier as a nation because of that mandate? Like, obesity is not down. Physical fitness isn't better. We know that we're not healthier as a nation since the 1960s. In fact, we're probably worse. And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm saying, why is that still a mandate? You know, I'm not saying eliminate gym classes. That was an easy A for me. I love gym classes. I'm an athlete. But does it have to be a mandate? You know, do we have to have a mandate for art class and for music class when most of us are never going to use that in our adult life? While it's fun and it keeps students engaged, I think we need to offer all of these elective credits that we offer, but take away the mandate. And that gives our school administrators the ability to guide more students to parenting and child development, because we know more than 80% of our student population are going to become parents.
That's a fact.
Think about it. That's right. How many classes do our kids take, even the core subjects? And I'm not in any way suggesting we remove our core subjects. But even our core subjects, how many of these things that we're teaching our kids can we say, in this classroom, wow, 80% of the kids are going to use the skills I'm teaching today every single day of their life for 2 decades. But you know what? We can say that about parenting and child development. That's how important this is.
That's right.
So I'm so glad that you are giving me an opportunity to talk about this and to get more people to understand the why behind what we're doing.
You know, something that we don't deal with as a nation, we don't deal with the whole human being, the inner, we used to call it in the Army, we call it a spiritual fitness. We don't deal with the whole person. And why we don't deal, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you why. One reason why is in impoverished areas, the focus is much different. You know, I can remember my mother telling me that when she was in school, what was that class called? Renee, it's called it's civics.
Okay, civics. Yes.
And she talked about how civics taught you how to balance a checkbook and things like that. And I took civics, but we never talked about that in civics. I can remember home ec. I remember taking that. I mean, just, you know, I learned and I'm gonna tell you, I type about 50 words per minute on a good day, and I did that because when I went to high school, I was in a smaller class for whatever reason. The class was so small, but that's how I learned how to type. I mean, it's just amazing. In some ways, it seems like things are being taken away from us intellectually in the school systems. And of course, as parents, it's our job to teach our kids at home. I get that. But at the end of the day, like always, I did a podcast on the importance of coaching. And I'm gonna still call you a professional tennis player. Yeah, you could play tennis on your own, superb, but when you had a coach, you were 100 times better.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and I think that's what we're sorely lacking. Because I know, like I said, the things you were telling me yesterday, and even the things you're talking about now, it's like, wow, this is we as a nation really have to evaluate what we're doing.
You know, you touched on some really, really good things, and that's the thing that's amazing. We can talk to people that have never even thought about these things, and yet at some level they get it. I mean, you get this. You just have to be a parent, and you know, or sometimes students just have to have babysat before, and they know. And so the military, actually, it's funny, you brought that up twice, and we are trying to get our programs into the military because my contacts have said this is a real issue. the vast majority of people, young men and women that are in the military, came right out of high school. They didn't know what they wanted to do. They didn't think they were wanted to go to college. They had no interest. They didn't really know what trade they wanted to be in. So they went into the military. What is the military's primary goal? Is to train us to be soldiers. And at some point, you're ready to get out of the military. Maybe it's 4 years, maybe it's 20 years. But at some point, most people are ready to leave the military. And so the process begins. The military has learned you can't just send trained soldiers out into civilian life because you don't settle arguments with guns, and life is tough. And so they actually have these classes, and we're hoping to get our stuff in and be a part of their retreats and seminars so that people in the military can begin to understand. And the same way with prisons. We put people in prison, and then we just expect when we release them that they're going to know how to behave better because we punished them. But if you go back to the same neighborhood, if you go back to the same family, and all of those people want you to be the same person you were before, you're likely to fall into the same trap. And so we have a opportunity to reach people. When we talk about kids, teaching kids parenting, parents are supposed to teach a lot of this stuff, but you know what? There's a thing called the cycle of generational dysfunction. And so if I've been raised in dysfunction because my parents were raised in dysfunction, because their parents were raised in dysfunction, nobody realizes this is dysfunctional. That's just normal. That's just what we do in this family. And so it's classes like this that can kind of open the eyes of students. And the amazing thing, Courtney, is that these teachers have figured out how to teach this and at the same time not be encouraging kids to go home and say to their parents, you're doing it wrong. I tell kids when I'm in the classroom, don't go home and say that. That is not going to score you any points with your parents. This is for your knowledge. This is for you to know. Now, if your parents are healthy enough that you can have these conversations, that's great. But don't start going home and lecturing your parents. That's not how we raise them.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I'm amazed that, you caught on to that stuff right away.
Most definitely. Like I said, I always tell people, and I tell people this on the podcast, a litmus test I do every day is always say, am I being the best father I can be? Am I being the best husband I can be? Am I being the best friend I can be? Am I being the best employee I can be? And if the answer is no, then you got work to do.
Right.
And I tell that to myself. I tell that to myself as a man, and I think that what you're doing is very much needed, and it's refreshing to know that and of course I know you wasn't bragging, but from what you're telling me, you and your husband are pretty financially stable. You've been that way for a while. And when you saw that you were enabling your brother-in-law, that's, I could imagine that being his brother, your husband had to stand back and say, you know what, I got to take the family aspect out of this and look at what's best for these children.
Right. And it tore off, it divided the family. These things are hard. When you're the first person that takes a stand, these things are hard. His brother was a decorated Vietnam War veteran. He was a colonel. He had retired from the Air Force. He was a prosecuting attorney. This mother in my story was a doctor, a general practitioner. These people were so much more educated than I am. They could have been very, very wealthy people, but this woman came from a horribly dysfunctional family because she shared her childhood with me, and she shared her mother's childhood with me. So I saw the generational cycle, but I didn't know what it was back then. I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, how fortunate was I that I didn't get born into a family that had all of these issues. And so I was never really mad at this mom. My brother-in-law wasn't raised like that, but you know what? He went off to Vietnam. Who knows what happened to him in Vietnam? I mean, we have these things that happen to us that make us dysfunctional because of mental health or a whole number of things. And then we have children. And we're trying to get people, like you just said, you have to do an evaluation every day. I was in a meeting last week with a military person talking about this possibility of taking our programs in. And she said to me, I had this young guy come into my office and he said, I didn't know marriage was going to be so hard. Now, there weren't even any kids involved. I didn't know marriage was going to be so hard. And she looked at him and said, have you ever heard the saying, working at your marriage? And he said, oh, yeah. She said, that's because you have to work. It's hard work. Well, parenting is hard work. It's not that fantasy.
That's right.
It's hard work. And we may get the fantasy, in 20 years, our kid may be on the college scholarship, being that great football player or being the lead violinist in the symphony or whatever. But you gotta wait years and years and put up with a lot of stomach flus and crying and fighting and homework and just, it's hard work.
It is. It is. Well, Renee, do you have anything else you'd like to speak about?
No, you know what? I'm so thankful that we just kind of had this open discussion. I just encourage anybody listening to go to Coke24.com, take a look at what we're about on there. I'm on Facebook under Coke24 as well. On LinkedIn, that's how we found each other.
Yeah.
I'm really working LinkedIn now. Mostly, I'm surprised because mostly what we connect with are teachers and school psychologists and counselors and school administrators because that's where we need to promote this.
Yes,
You guys got to take the bull by the horn and make this a priority in your school district.
That's right.
But occasionally somebody will click on a podcaster, and so it was just a good thing that either it was me or somebody else clicked on you, and we got connected. That's awesome.
yeah. I get a lot of emails lately. Since LinkedIn, I've gotten a lot of different traction, and I'm very grateful for it. I don't take a lot of times people want to collab, and I will collaborate, but for the most part, I'm very selective because I'm a brand, and
right.
And I don't, and like I said, there are times where I'm talking about an array of topics. You can go on my podcast and hear it, but at the end of the day, I like to talk about real life. Basically, is what I'm all about. Real life topics, things that affect not only America but Black America and white America and things of that nature. And I can, and most of my my experience in life is as a Black man. But at the same token, this is many people assume that all the negative stereotypes, it comes just from Black America, but it doesn't. Like you said, with your brother-in-law, we're talking about people that had that, like you said, on paper they look swell, but
right.
Behind the scenes, it's a whole nother reality that's being dealt with. And I'm so glad that you reached out to me. I really am. I'm so grateful for that.
Well, thank you for being receptive and giving me an audience and an ear. And if there's ever anything I can do for you, just let me know.
Most definitely. Renee, if you could, hang on for a minute. I'm going to end the podcast. And, I want to talk with you for maybe a couple brief minutes if you have time. Is that okay?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. Well, everybody, there you have it. I'm going to put the name of the nonprofit in the title of the podcast. And I really enjoyed this podcast. And like I said before, Renee reached out to me through my email and at info@cigarswithmacpod.com. And guys, don't forget to please download this podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. Also, if you have any show topics or you want to discuss anything with me, hit me up at info@cigarswithmacpod.com. That's info@cigarswithmacpod.com. Also, If you want to support the podcast financially, hit us up on Cash App, $Cigars with Mac. And also, please don't forget to follow us on YouTube. Hit the notification bell, subscribe, like, follow, and share on YouTube. And we're out.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool. Only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool. Only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.